So on the Tracy Ullman show, how were the writing duties split up amongst the writers? Did you write for a specific character?
You usually, most shows you came in with an idea, and we wrote, major sketches which were discussed, but then we wrote all those lines, those lines that different characters said. You just went off and did those on your own. However many you felt like doing for however many characters you felt like doing. But we met around a table and we discussed premises, and it was very democratic. Tracy was clearly the head writer, actually, and she's a writer. I've worked with so many stars who say that they're writers or that they're writing, or because they come into the room and, disrupt us and throw out ideas, and we throw out their ideas. And she actually sits, at an empty computer screen and writes. So she would come in with material, and I did a lot of sketches with her. But we basically met and discussed, what we were going to do. It was a small staff. And then we went away. We wrote our individual things. We wrote all these lines. We came back and read them around the table. And people took different characters. And she played, every time we read them around the table, she played the characters fully with all the voices. And she switched the voices, sometimes she played more than one immediately. And she gave it her all. So on those days, and I think we met once a week, we really went through a lot of the sketches, and with her performing everything. I was the worst reader around the table. It would be like there'd be a dull spot, and then it would be, of course, it was my line that I didn't come in with. But you would think it was a performance. No makeup, but all those voices, amazing.
And who was technically the showrunner? Who had sort of the final pass at the script?
Her husband produced it, Alan McEwen, and he's so nice, and she's so nice, and they're in love, and she makes him laugh, and it's just, it's nice. It's a really nice Hollywood job, which it's very, very refreshing, and it's so excellent. So he did the basic producing, but as far as the material is concerned, which is what we were all just involved with, because it was written before it even began filming, she ran it. She ran the table.
So did you see the filming, or were you not involved at that point?
I went to some of it, and they were done like movies. I mean, they were really little movies with great production value, and they looked great. And I have to use the word lucky so many times when I'm talking here, blah, 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 about, tell a writer to talk, and they don't stop because we don't get the chance. But anyway, it was really one of the luckiest jobs I ever got. And to be able to stay on these things for years is also a joy, because you come back to the same people. It's fun. Everybody gets close. You find out everything about everybody. You see all the men, talking to their wives, saying, "Yeah, I love you too." You can, you get really intimate with people when you're on a staff, and so it's nice to go away and come back to the same people, and you have sort of a shorthand with them.
So how? You've talked about the difference between, the sort of the boundaries of being on HBO versus a network, but how has writing a sketch in general changed from your time on Carol Burnett to the time with Tracy Ullman?
It changed drastically. And I think that one of the reasons that comedy writers don't last for a long time is because, again, going back to the ear, they don't understand that there's a new comedy timing. And it was just different. I mean, what she did really pure characters. I mean, what Carol did were tastes of characters and great in their way. She did them differently. But it was a time also when things were a little more realistic. They were filming them. It was in there. Instead of having an audience and taping it and having the cameras between the actors and the audience and being on a set and the fourth wall and everything, these were little films, and it was, the details were microscoped. Microscoped. No. It was as if you had a microscope on the details. Very different, like writing a film. But the comedy was, in the very small details. It was right in her face. There were times when before I started, I watched one of her specials, and I couldn't believe that she played the men. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I kept looking and looking, and I couldn't believe it. And there were times when actors would come on to perform with her, where they didn't know it was her because she was already in makeup, and she was, a Vietnamese woman, or she was a man. And so, they would talk to her and not realize it was her.
How has the audience changed for comedy since your Carol Burnett days to the Tracy Ullman show?
I think that the audiences now in comedy, that there are young audiences watching young comedy shows, and older audiences maybe watching, and then a mixture for Saturday Night Live. But then I think everybody was watching in their living room. I mean, that's my perception of it anyway. I never think about, who you're writing for, because in television, you put it out there, and you hope you're writing for a lot of people. On the Tracy Ullman show really had a hip audience, very, and very devoted, and they know, talk about details. They know the details of so much. I mean, they've memorized it. With Carol, it was more of an overall that they appreciated.
So let's talk about the characters. Did Tracy come in with characters developed, or did that happen? Did the writers come up with the characters as well?
Both. Mm-hmm. So, but she came in with a lot of characters that she was going to use for this, for this show. But characters she had used before. Ruby was a character she used before. A lot of them. A lot of the British characters. Fern she had used before. And I'm trying to think of what was developed new. But it was both. It was both.
Were there any characters specifically that you created?
I might have. I don't think so. I don't think so. But I don't think so.
What were some of your favorite characters to write for?
Once I got comfortable, it would be any of them. It was the British ones in the beginning weren't, and what I gravitated to was, Fern and anything else that was very easy. There was a young college girl. She was new, and so it would be really the American ones, and I enjoyed it. And then I wrote in the last year especially, or even in the last year and a half, I would say, I wrote a lot with Tracy. So the two of us did a lot of big sketches together, where I would go in and we would sit there and write together and talk about clothes, and then write and talk about boys and then write. It was, I mean, we were women, but we did a lot of writing together in the last year and a half.
What was your process when you wrote together?
She sat at the computer, not the typewriter anymore, and she's very meticulous. She always likes. I like to vomit things out, and then go back and rewrite. And sometimes I've changed characters' names in the middle of the script, and I that careless or whatever. I just do it once and then go back and rewrite. She likes to every day read what we did the day before or what we've done so far and fix it and then go on. So our process was slightly different, but I went with hers because she was the one at the computer, I couldn't wrestle her to the ground. But it was verbal. You hear it. You say it out loud.
What was your process when you wrote by yourself, when you'd go off and do stuff on your own?
Then you have to hear it in your head. and you have, you trust yourself at a certain point. And you just know it's funny. I mean, when I go to a movie and it's a comedy, and I'm just sitting there like every other comedy writer in the world saying, that's funny, because you're hearing a line and you're not laughing, but you're saying that's funny. That's what I'm sort of saying to myself.
How do you know?
It's an instinct. It's timing. Ruth Costner, who was on her toes and played the violin, that helped. My family putting on shows helped. In high school I was funny. So, but I should have known those first 6 Burnett sketches were horrible. See, so you don't always know. No, but I pretty much since then have known. Now it doesn't always work. I mean, somebody else who you're handing it into doesn't think it's so as funny as you do. And they'll tell you, and sometimes you argue and sometimes you just let it go. The worst thing is a comedy writer arguing with a producer or a head writer saying, no, it's funny, and getting really upset about it, and please, there's so much more where that came from. You let it go. But it's a consensus then. I mean, you're handing things in. You have a boss. There's somebody's name is on your check, unless you're writing for yourself, which I do in novels and other books and stuff like that. So you have to respect that maybe they'll say it's not funny. But I told you before that hours ago that I've never handed anything in where they haven't said, oh yeah, make it funnier.
Do you have a favorite sketch or episode from Tracy Takes On?
I loved, and Tracy and I did it together, this sketch where, what is his name, the McCarthy, where Ruby was a young woman and she was his girlfriend. And I love that sketch.
What do you think is the legacy of Tracy Takes On?
I think it has a very specific audience of just totally devoted, just so devoted. I'm not talking Golden Girls or Carol Burnett, which is like, you can almost say, she has a real following, and it's a really so specific, people who know every single word she's ever said. I mean, I've loved her since the movie Plenty. She was really young.
Do you think that was the last of the great variety shows? Will the variety show make a comeback?
No. I used to do this bit with Kenny, which is, we were in our 20s, and I used to say, "Old man of comedy, what do you think will happen?" Now I'm doing it. For real. Saturday Night Live has existed, so something else will come along. I mean, there's no reason for it not to.
You were reunited with Tracy in 2008 on State of the Union, so talk a little bit about your memory of that and how the two shows compared.
State of the Union was a half hour, I think, and it was faster. And it was not as in depth, and she didn't do all the characters. I mean, she did some, and it was good, and it was topical. So that was an advantage. But I love Tracy Takes On so much. So it's, I don't think it was much better. It was fabulous.
What are your current projects?
I've been writing books. I mean, that's what I do a lot. I had a book out last year, and it was supposedly nonfiction, but it was everything Ruth Costner ever taught me. It was called How to Raise Your Adult Children, which is an idea I had for a long time. And it's supposedly how to raise your adult children, because I have adult children, and now they're having adult children. So again, it was in the air. A lot of kids are moving back home, and people are not getting rid of their kids so easily, and because of the economics in this country, and so they're closer, and they're in each other's faces. And so I really thought that this would be a good topic. So there I was in the pits again and doing it. And I'll probably get into a novel, and we'll see. Writing on a television staff, I always said is a young man's game, even though I was a woman. Because it's a lot of hours. And so if you want to do any other writing in your life, it's hard. And I do other stuff.
So what does being a writer mean to you?
Everything. I don't know what it's like not to be a writer. And I know how hard it is. It's so hard. It's so hard that if it weren't this hard, everybody would do it, because, not everybody can paint, but everybody can physically write or type. And so I know how difficult it is. I know it's such a great ride. It's really fantastic. And I love every minute of it. I hate writing, by the way. This should be the end, because I hate the process.
Why?
It's just hard, and when I'm doing it myself, it's lonely, and it's like it's like pulling teeth. Arnie Rosen, my first head writer, used to say when we knew that we were going to have to sit and rewrite something, he would pull the typewriter over and he would say, "It's like a dentist drill, isn't it?" And that's the image I still have in my head. So I don't like the process, but I just love when it's done. And I love being with other people in a room, in a writer's room, because the energy is so great. And, the level of comedy is so good that you just admire it. It's just so funny. Now, everybody thinks, or they'll say to my husband, it must be fun living with her. I assure you it's not. And he would say so. Because comedy writers, I don't know how many you've interviewed, but we're not that much fun at home.
Do you ever get writer's block?
Not yet. I haven't gotten writer's block. I mean, I've written, thousands of words. And I'm lucky that way, because I don't know what that is either, but it's got to be painful.
How has show business changed for women since you started?
It used to be, especially female writers. There were, a few before I started, obviously, comedy writers I'm talking about, but now it's much more common. Although women will still say it's mainly male staffs on comedy shows, but there was 1 in 100, and now many more, and many more creators, and it's just, and I think it's another whole thing. So many women are producers and hiring, and it's a whole different world. Again, it's like I think of Kenny and me saying, joking around and saying, I used to say to him, old man of comedy. Now I'm, looking back, it's very different. It is. Well, thankfully it is. Very thankfully.
What advice do you have for someone who wants to be a TV writer?
Number one, you have to write. You can't sit around all day just telling people, fun ideas. You really have to get it down on paper. And number two is that it happens. People start every day. And so, the way to get in now is spec scripts. And there are new people starting all the time. And sometimes when you put a staff together, you're looking for somebody who's, some people who are old and experienced, or older and experienced, I shouldn't say old, and some people who are, would appear new and fresh. And it's an advantage sometimes to be starting because you're cheaper and you're going to be more energetic. And when you put a staff together, like the baseball team, you have young players and old players, and so older players. And so I think that it's possible. If it was possible for me, I just know it's possible. When people say to me, what is your advice? It's do it. It's not easy, but do it. You can't just talk about it.
What's your proudest achievement?
My children are my proudest achievement, and they're funny, and that was important to me. The most important thing was that they were funny. And after that, it's I don't know. I have hits that I think about. The Carol Burnett Show, Sheila Levine. When people say to me, The Main Event, when people say to me, what do you do? And I say, I'm a comedy writer. They say, what would I know? So it's Golden Girls and Tracy, just to finish out that list. That's what they would know. And that's something to be proud of.
Absolutely. What's your biggest regret?
My biggest regret is not writing some spec drama things. and maybe getting into that field a bit, because I did practically everything else. I did Broadway, I did movies, I did books, television, which I loved, and but I didn't really, so that was something that I should have really tried.
What is your legacy in the business?
I think that people, I think that people, when they know who I am, know that I was one of the first women to write comedy. Women come up to me at the Writers Guild, like when we did the 101 Best Television Shows, and I was on the panel, and they say, "You were my inspiration." So, that's where it is, that's where it is. And I get to hear it. I really get to hear it. I also had a really good name for a writer. It was easy to remember. So that was an advantage.
Excellent. Well, that's all of our questions, and thank you so much for your time today. It's been
Oh
wonderful.
my God. We never get to do this. Writers talking, it's a miracle.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.